30 years ago, I was limited to building with this and this. And this is one of the reasons why we don't use it anymore for most of our deck construction. This is a piece of Western red tight knot cedar. It is called a 5/4 by 4. Why a 5/4? That's kind of an odd number. Well, before they mill a board, they rough cut a board in the mill first. So this actually is a true 1 inch by 3.5. But before they make it pretty and smooth, they have a little extra on both sides, because this is called an S4S board, which stands for surface 4 sides. So everything's smooth, it has a nice radius edge. So they call it 5/4 by 4 because when they rough cut it, it's 5/4 of an inch. So it's 1.125 inches or so. Then they mill it into a 1 by 3.5. So there's an extra 1/2 inch on the width, and there's an extra, 3/8 of an inch or so on the top and bottom. We used to install miles of this stuff. You can see there's imperfections in it. It's Mother Nature. This is not uncommon for a board to have a split after it's dry. Things like that. Picks up tannin stains very easily. Anything that's not galvanized, if it's ferrous metal, it's gonna leave some kind of a stain in the decking. This is just from getting wet, and a piece of banding or metal was banded to this board. Probably why we maybe rejected it, for those 2 reasons. And this was probably 25 years ago. I just had this piece sitting around for 25 years in my boneyard until we had to make this video. So finally, we were able to use this board. But the main thing, the main reason why our industry has changed and we've started using alternate materials is because of maintenance and aging and decay. So this is what happens to cedar in the first 8 weeks once you install it. It just eventually starts to fade and start to turn gray. And then eventually it all turns gray. And some people like that look, that's great. But if you don't put some kind of a UV protectant on it, it's gonna continue to go gray, start to crack and warp and twist. And then eventually it's gonna dry rot. I've seen this product, because it's so thin, I've seen this product decay and rot out in the wrong circumstance in 7 years. I've also torn my own personal decks that I built 30 years ago. I started building decks as a professional deck builder in 1991 when I was 21 years old. My first probably 200 decks I've ever built were done in 5/4 by 4 Western red tight knot cedar. That's a little bit of a history on this. A lot of this stuff was milled in Canada, and you can actually see they used to put a stamp on a lot of the boards. You can barely make it out. I hated that, man. I was like, why are you guys polluting my cedar? I used to go into a lumber yard and I would hand select every deck board. If they would let me, I would hand select every deck board I was using before I would use it. So we'd restack the piles and butt all the end grains tight, but I would get exactly what I wanted. And then I'd still have a little bit of a rejection rate once we're on site, but it minimized the issues and problems I had with the decking. It's called tight knot because the branches, they're knots, they're tight. You can see a little crack right here, but the branches go through the tree. So wherever there's a knot, that would be a tree branch that was growing through the tree and out. So usually a tight knot cedar has quite a few. These knots are great. Sometimes the knots are not tight. There's like a dark ring around them. It's like as you get closer to the outermost part of the tree, the bark grows into the tree a little bit, and it creates like a looseness. Once the cedar dries out, that little bit of bark ring also dries out, and then the knots fall out of the boards. You want to avoid those. So if these knots had a dark ring around them, they might, and usually it's a bigger knot, okay, a bigger branch. If that had a dark ring, it could potentially slip out of the board in the future. So we always try to avoid that kind of stuff when we were building with cedar. Now, oh yeah, one more thing. Has a distinctive smell to it. I just cut this board. You can smell, I know you can't smell, but if you ever get a chance, you should smell a piece of Western red tight knot cedar. Some people love that scent. Now, the deck we just replaced, go back in a couple videos and see the deck we just replaced. I don't know if we caught demolition, maybe in one of our shorts. This is a piece of 2x6. Now, it's not a full 2x6 right now. This edge is right here. Okay, it's 5.5 by 1.5 inch, finished mill. But this is called Alaska yellow cedar. It has a little bit different color than tight knot cedar. Western red, you can see it does have kind of a little bit more of a reddish tone, and this has more of a yellow tone, but it does definitely have a distinctive smell to it. It's a completely different odor that this board puts out than Western Red does. But this board actually has a longer lifespan than Western Red does. It's firmer, it has tighter grain, and I've seen this product buried in dirt before, but it does rot as well because the deck we were tearing apart, some of these boards were decaying, but it does definitely have a longer lifespan. And I think most of this deck was clear, which means there was no knots. It's hard to tell because it's such a heavy stain that's been applied to this board, but if we had a planer, we could plane some of this stuff out and it would be beautiful to look at. But again, the client decided, you know what, we don't want the maintenance, and the deck had to be taken apart anyway. So, but it is just another common product that we've used in the past, not nearly as much because it's more rare than Western Red Tight Knot Cedar is, but it's just kind of a cool product I thought I would share with you guys. So every deck frame that we built 30 years ago was done in pressure treated hemlock. Sometimes they call it hem fir because the batches from the mill could be mixed with hemlock and Doug fir. So they'd call it hem fir, but 90% of that unit is probably gonna be hemlock. We've talked about pressure treated hemlock a lot in our videos. You can see the incisions in it. This may not be available where you are in your geographic location. A lot of this type of material is found west of the Rockies. I've noticed that it's starting to creep east of the Rockies as well. East of the Rockies, you're primarily using probably southern yellow pine or something like that. But pressure treated hemlock is what's available to us in our region. Part of the problem of it is it's been incised, so they can force the treatment deeper into the product by pressurization. You can kind of see on the end grain where those incisions are, it does go in deeper than the surface of the board, but it's not really going in super far. It's kind of like protecting the outer skin of it. So every time you make a cut in this board, it's advised that you put some kind of an end grain treatment or preservative on the end of the board to soak in so that insects and termites and things like that don't want to eat it. We use a product called Q-Tech Extreme. And hey, look, remember those knots I was telling you about? You can kind of see a dark ring right here around this knot. Eventually, when the board dries out, this knot may fall out of the board. So that's kind of a cool thing to see. Just so those of you that don't know, I'd say in a couple months from now when this board was really dry, it's not wet, and I took a hammer and hit that, depending on what the backside looks like, it's a tight knot on this side. So probably wouldn't fall out, but if this dark ring, and I can tell it, I can feel it, it's a little bit elevated off the surface of the board, it would come out, just a FYI. So back 30 years ago, I was using Western Red Tight Knot Cedar 5/4x4 because it's a more economical board. We could use a 2x4 or a 2x6, but the price jumped quite a bit to get to those boards. And then you go to clear cedar, which was astronomical and still is nowadays. I think clear cedar costs more than a lot of the composite boards that are being manufactured nowadays. Maybe not so much PVC boards, which is mostly what we use now. We're gonna get into all that. I'm gonna show you some of the materials that we use now that I wish I had 30 years ago, because some of the decks that I've already replaced would probably still be standing instead of rotting away. Let's go take a look. All right, so again, a prime example of, remember we're talking about the loose knots? You can see right here, here's a tree branch, and look, I can stuff my finger into this one here. So we rejected this board. We wouldn't use it because these are just really soft areas that will probably, this knot may come out, and you're losing that surface area in the joist, which is structural. So that's probably not a great board to use. Now, pressure treated materials are great for longevity if they're installed properly. You're gonna get 30 years out of that frame, maybe 20 if you're lucky. But one of the problems, and I don't know how well you can see it in this pile, is this material we just used last week, and this is the leftovers from a project we just built, but you can already see that the boards are starting to twist. It's been really hot, even though it's raining today. It was really hot last week. It was in the 80s. And this wood started to twist and warp and just kind of do its own thing in the sun. I didn't have it covered, and because I was just in a rush, right? The materials are twisting and warping. So if you're gonna leave pressure treated materials sitting around in your yard before you install them, or maybe you're in between or something like that, or you're going away for the weekend and you didn't install all your pressure treated framing, just wet it down with a hose and cover it with a tarp. It'll help keep it nice and flat and not warp and twist, because that's the last thing you want. If you just finish building your frame and you, again, aren't gonna put decking on it right away, I don't advise doing that for very long because your deck frame can twist, shrink, warp, and do all kinds of weird stuff on you. Even if it's a nice tight frame, it can take some damage because you're putting in wet lumber in a hot 80 degree, 90 degree day, several of those consecutively, and the frame's gonna wanna move on you. So you wanna make sure that you cover up that frame as soon as you can. I don't advise leaving a frame exposed for weeks on end. I see it all the time, driving by in a neighborhood and somebody framed their deck and we might be there a month and they still haven't laid the decking, and you look at the frame and you're like, yep, that's gonna do that. That frame's gonna do that, I guarantee it. So that brings us to today. 30 years later, what are we doing about this pressure treated framing? A pressure treated frame, when you buy it, this is called a 2x10. It's supposed to be 1.5 by 9.5. Sometimes I find the mills will mill to 9.25, 1.5 by 9.25. But what we get is we get 1.5 by 9 1/8 up to 9 3/4 in the same unit of materials. So if you could imagine, you put a 9 1/8 board, and then 16 inches later you have a 9 3/4 or 9 5/8, and then the next board you have a 9 1/8 again. Your decking is going to do this. It's definitely going to have some hump or roller coasting to it. We avoid some of that when we're using this type of materials by stacking it all, grading it up. We just did a video on this. Go back and check it out in our channel. I would search for grading framing in the search bar on our page. That's enough about that. So what do we have available to us today that we didn't have available to us, I'm gonna say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, not 30 years ago, and I wish I had these materials today. So what you see here, if you watch our channel at all, for the last 1.5 years, we have been framing in aluminum. Now, aluminum is perfectly straight. Every board is exactly the same. It locks together with brackets that come from the manufacturer, and it lasts forever. So you're gonna get 200 years out of this frame, and it's recyclable. So if you're done with your deck, or the new homeowner decides that they don't like the configuration, you can dismantle the deck and recycle the aluminum, and you'd be a done deal with it, you know, but you would be able to get it recycled, and you're zero impact on the environment kind of thing, you know, it's a green product. So we have aluminum framing here, so we use that quite a bit and we really like it. There are some things that maybe take a little bit more time to install, but for the perfection that we get, it's kind of worth having for this upgrade. It is an upgrade. It costs more than pressure treated hemlock does, but a lot of my clients see the value in building something that not only they can enjoy and their kids can enjoy and their grandkids can enjoy, but the next generation of who owns that house. It's an upsell for the house when they go to sell the house, because you're never gonna have to mess with that deck. We're putting a 50-year decking product, which we'll get to in a minute, and we're putting a 100-year frame on it, maybe even more. I'm gonna say, you know, it'll last longer than that, but depending on earthquakes and everything else, who knows? I'm just guessing, really. But I can confidently say that I know this deck's gonna last 50 years. So that's 20, 30 years longer than a standard wood deck will. So you're paying more for it now, but then it's lasting a lot longer. All right, and then what you see here is also a brand new product. This is called Owens Corning structural framing. They make it in a 2x10, and they make it in a 2x12, and I think they make it in a 2x8 as well. So this is a fiberglass backed PVC composite framing material that we can use for, I'm using it mostly for stair stringers at the moment. You can also use it for floor joists in your deck. We prefer to use the aluminum because it's priced accordingly, about the same. You're gonna spend almost as much on the Owens Corning as you are on the aluminum. So we like the aluminum. It's a thinner profile and it spans 15'6" on 12-inch centers. So it meets our spanning requirement. This product, I don't have the engineering on it. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not knocking it. I just like the aluminum for framing. But for stair stringers, there's nothing better. You can see that I have a partial unit of 2x12s over here. And we use those for all of our stair stringers now. I'm never gonna go back to using wood for stair stringers, probably for the rest of my career, okay? So that is industry changing. Now, yes, it does cost more, but every staircase that I've ever torn apart on any deck for the last 30 years, the bottom of the staircase is always rotten. Now, I used to put PVC underneath my stair stringers to protect the stringers from getting wet and decaying. But now I can just put this structural composite right on the ground, right in the dirt, right on concrete, whatever, and it's never gonna rot. It just took the elimination right out of a problem that always happens. Because treated lumber, if you put it right on concrete, it's like a sponge. It's gonna keep soaking up that water, and then eventually it's just gonna start to decay. It's proven. I know this already because I've torn out so many decks, and so many of them have that rotten problem. Which brings us into our alternate decking materials. So I wish I had PVC decking 30 years ago when I was building decks, because the new and up and coming deck builders, all you guys out there, you're so lucky compared to where I was 30 years ago when I started my business, because you have so much more available to you. Your building decks are gonna last so much longer than they did in the past, right? So my decking of choice is a PVC product called AZEK. It's made by a company called TimberTech. They make composite and PVC deck boards, and they are wonderful products. You can see right here, now these boards are upside down because they're being protected when we transfer them from job site to job site. But this one's called Coastline. It's a really nice color. It's gray tones with some darker variegation in the boards with a nice grain to them. So those are really cool, and it's our decking of choice. There's multiple widths that you can get. As you can see, there's 3.5, there's 7.5, and there's 5.5. And there's also different ways you can fasten it. They have a groove board and they have a solid board. These are all solid board planks that you see here, but they also have hidden fasteners and groove boards, which is really cool. Oh, and you can see the groove boards right here, different color, but same concept. You have a groove in them, so you can put a hidden fastener in those and use a clip system to attach your deck right to the joists. Now, the aluminum system that we have also has an adaptive clip that locks into the top of the track of the aluminum frame. It works really nicely with the groove board. So when I first started building decks, there wasn't any kind of a hidden fastener system. We had to either do like a edge with pre-drills and screws, or eventually then some track systems came out where you screw a piece of stainless to the side of the deck and then you screw underneath. Or if it wasn't stainless, it was like galvanized steel. But we just tore one of those apart, and the galvanized steel was rotting away as well. So hindsight, if you only want a deck to last 20 years, and that's, I'm only in this house 5 years, that might be a great option. But if you're gonna go to that premium price of doing a hidden fastener, why don't you do it to where it's gonna last longer than that? What if you end up staying in the house longer than that, and then you gotta replace the deck again before you move out? Just a thought. So these deck boards, again, my choice. PVC, I think, is the way to go. TimberTech also makes some great composite boards. We've done some decks with those as well, just not quite as many. The reason, again, I love the PVC is we can also face screw it with a product called Cortex. We can face screw it to wood, we can face screw it to aluminum, and then you put these really cool hidden clips in, and it hides the fastener, and then it just looks really nice, and the clients really love it. It's a great product. So those are some products that I wish I had 30 years ago, guys. If you like this video, don't forget, click that subscribe button, hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when we're putting out new videos, and don't forget to check out our new podcast. Links below, guys. So leave us a comment. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.